So, getting back to our discussion on perception. So, we talked about perception last week. Very briefly, we spoke about perception. We looked into some of the perceptual bias that is caused by us, and we tried to understand the implication of perception when it comes to the organization. We came to the realization that perception is what forms our reality. The way we perceive the world is actually becomes our reality. And as you can see in this image here is that the two person, they're actually looking at the same picture or the same object. But the thing that they have in their mind is different, because the only difference is that they're standing on two different sides. So quite often this happens in reality, that the reality that we see may be unique or indifferent, but even though the way we make sense out of it, that's way too different from one to another. And there are implications when it comes to the organization, because within the organization, there are lots of people, and we all need to consider all of those idiosyncratic factors. By the word idiosyncratic means the unique or the separate factors, because all of us, we're human beings, and we have in previous chapters, we looked into personality. Like our personality varies from one to another. And depending on our personality, we also form our own reality as well. So that's why it's really important to look into perception. So just very briefly going through perception is that it's a process by which individuals organize and interpret their sensory impression in order to give meaning to their environment. So we have how many senses have we got?
5.
Yes, we have 5 senses, right? What are the senses? Touch, feel, taste, hear, vision, right? So we've got 5 different senses. We're all human beings. We have 5 different senses. So whenever an external, this is called a stimuli. A stimuli is an object or like an incident or like something like that from the external world. Whenever we get exposed to a stimuli, we catch that, and our 5 senses will actually catch that stimuli or get exposed to. Then we make a sense out of that. That's being processed inside our brain, and then we make a sense of that, or that is what our perception is. So it's clearly it's our sensory impression, and then we give a meaning to that. And the reason we are all talking about, because within the organization there are significant implication when it comes to these factors. We talked about this very briefly, but I thought I'll just quickly just reflect on it a little bit more. So on the left side image, like this image, what do you see? Can you just write it on the chat screen? What exactly do you see? This image, when you put a glance, at a glance, what exactly do you see in this image? Just put your opinion on the chat screen. Okay, a girl wearing a hat looking backward, a woman. Yeah, it's better to be more precise. Okay. Is this woman like a young woman or an old woman? Okay, so as you can see, like we're all looking at the same image, but the way we're perceiving is way too different, right? Because some of you are saying this looks like a young woman, some of you are saying this is like a mid-aged woman, some of you are saying it's an old woman. So all of us, we are varying in our opinion on exactly what we're looking at. But the reality is you're all looking at the same picture. I'm not showing different picture to different people, right? Okay, the next object here, what do you see? Do you see, like, what exactly do you see in this image here on the right-hand side? Yeah, just type your like response in the chat screen. Two people facing each other. All right. But some might also say, yes, a vase. Like you might say it's a flower vase. Like, if you just look at the white, it might appear you as a flower vase or just like a goblet or something like a stand of like, a candle stand, a candle lamp, something like that. So essentially, again, just getting back to our like, previous example. And for those of your camera is still turned off, you just need to make sure that your camera is on while you're in the class. We quickly administer this one, and this will have an implication on your class attendance as well. So please make sure you comply with that as well. Your cameras must be turned on while you are in the class. If you're not, it will have implication on your class attendance. So, as I was reflecting that why perception is important, and as we've discussed this one before, that a lot of these concepts actually are derived from the psychology discipline. Like these are the tests usually done within the psychology discipline. You will see that in the study of psychology, they typically do these sort of assessments of people's like attention, where exactly they're focusing and how they comprehend, how they make sense of the world and things like that. But even though we, as a student of business and organizational behavior, we are studying these. So can someone just reflect back based on our discussion from last week, why it's important for us to understand perception? Anybody? What's the implication of perception within the organization, or the study of perception within organization? Right. It sounds like I'm just doing class with myself only.
So I think it is important because we deal with a lot of people in our organization that we're working in, and there are many implications. Like when we're recruiting people, we have to judge their characteristics and their behavior so that we can get the best people for our organization, and so that everyone will be compatible with them, and the workflow will be better. I think that's why we're studying them, so that we can assume their behavior and work accordingly.
All right, that's a good reflection. Thanks, Athar. Okay, anybody else?
I think the productivity of workers depend on how they perceive their work or like the task they're doing. So I think productivity is also like dependent on their perseverance.
Yes. So yes, both of you are right. So we looked into several factors. When it comes to perception, we looked into several factors, because when it comes to performance evaluation, we need to understand about perception, like how do we perceive. When it comes to monitoring or managing your workforce, it's important to understand perception, because the managers, their perception could be different from one to another. Performance evaluation, appraisal, managing people, in every situation, it's really important to understand your employees' perception. And equally important is the managerial perception as well, because imagine a manager who has a biased opinion or who has some perceptual bias or who is characterized with some problems like stereotyping or halo effect or some other problems. It's quite likely that you can never expect a very independent or a fair judgment or fair treatment, and that will have implication on the overall organization. So that's the reason it's really important for us to understand perception. So last class, I actually assigned you with coming up with some examples for the various perceptual problems that we discussed. So some of the perceptual problems that we discussed were selective perception, halo effect, contrast effects, projection, and stereotyping. And I asked you to watch the videos. There are some videos that are uploaded already. I think the pre-recorded videos came up with some nice and funny examples from Indian movies and lots of funny examples to illustrate each of these perceptual problems. Wonder, let's first look into selective perception. Can someone give me an example of an example of selective perception? Let's do some cold calling. Nilay Ghosh, some thoughts from you.
So is it kind of that the way I to think more, sir? Can I take time, sir?
Okay, all right. Passing on to Scholastica. Nope, not in the class.
Yes, sir. I'm in the
You're in the class, all right. Have you fixed your camera, Scholastica, yet?
I'm not sure about selective perception.
Sir, can it be something related to memory? For example, I was in a place and I have a bad memory like associated with that place. So next time when I go there, like I feel bad or like I don't like that place. So I perceive that place differently from others. Can it be like that?
Not really. It's just like, all right, I'll give you an exact example. I would like to hear from some others. Like,
Can I give an example?
yeah, sure, go ahead.
So whenever we tend to see people with glasses, we sometimes think that they are nerd. Is that a selective perception?
Okay, yeah, that's a good example. Yes, I'll take that. So it's just selectively judging people based on some characteristics. So you may have seen one of your employees sometimes coming late to work, and you will consider that based on that, you will consider that that employee is not very regular. Okay, so here's one example. If you dislike some teachers, you tend to focus on their negative personality and ignore any positive qualities that would be inconsistent with your opinion about them. All right, so here's one example. So if you tend to dislike someone for one particular reason, what would you do generally? You would make an overall summary of their individual, of that individual as you don't like him or her. And that is a selective perception, because you're judging that individual based on just one aspect, selectively perceiving that at one occasion, that teacher may have been rude to you, or that teacher may not have been fair to you. But based on that, you're making an overall assumption, and you're telling your rest of the class teacher or classmates or your friends that, oh, I've been into that teacher's class. Mr. Simonson, Dr. Simonson, oh, I don't like that guy at all because he always asks us to turn our cameras on. He never cares, how do I look? Because I'm always worried about how do I look on the camera, but he never cares. And based on that, you're making an overall assumption that this lecturer is very authoritative and he's not good. But actually, that's not right because Dr. Simonson is not that bad guy at all. Like, if you happen to know him well. So that example can apply to any situation. So a selective perception is one of the big problem is that when within the organization, you tend to selectively judge people based on their behavior, you tend to overlook all the other good aspect of that individual. All right. Next one was a halo effect. Let's talk about examples. Anyone? I'm really surprised that none of you have watched those videos, like, the videos that are in box. There are some nice, really good, lessons already given with some nice examples as well.
Sir, can I say?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, halo effect, we know that halo effect is drawing a general perception, right? So, for example, if we see a overweight person, we might instantly assume that he eats a lot, or
Okay, all right.
or
Anyone
also
else?
that he wastes a lot of money on food. But it could be that he.
Yeah, no, good. That was good, Ikra. I like that. Okay, anyone else?
Sir, when we look into someone,
Afiku, could you please
pictures and-
speak when you're with your cameras on because we have to know who is Afiku.
sir, my network is not stable, sir.
Okay, all right. You can't get away with that excuse every day. Some days your camera has to work. But anyway, carry on.
Might be, yeah. Sir, whenever we see a big photograph of any person and they look too good, we all think that he will also a good person as well.
I didn't quite get that. Could you repeat?
Sir, when one assume that a good-looking person in a photograph is also an overall good person.
Okay. All right. Anyone else?
So,
okay, go ahead, Salman.
sir, I'm having trouble opening my camera. I will open it in a few minutes, sir. Halo effect, sir, in my opinion, is kind of a bias. Like, sir, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, go ahead.
It can also be perceived as that someone who looks smart is smart, like someone who dresses well and always goes to the institution wearing a nice shirt can perceive as a smart one, as compared to someone who is wearing like a t-shirt or a jersey. So I think that is halo effect.
Okay, yeah, good one. Okay, here's one example from me. So a typical halo error made by managers is to assume that a person with a good attendance record is responsible in all areas of performance. Another is being influenced by the previous year's performance evaluation. All right, so managers, I'm just giving some organizational context or examples so that we can easily relate. So managers will assume that a person with good attendance record is always good, all right? And someone with a bad attendance record will be bad in everything. So that is a halo effect. So what's the difference between selective perception and halo effect? So in halo effect, you're just looking at one single characteristics, and in selective perception, you are actually just perceiving one specific aspect, which is just based on your interest, background, experience, and attitude about someone. And you're not looking into other things that are also, because you are so focused on what you think, on what you want to make sense out of that individual, rather than the overall picture. But halo effect, you're just looking into one single characteristics of that individual, and then you're just making a gross assumption about that individual is that he or she is like either efficient or not efficient, something like that. So that's halo effect. Contrast effect. Comparison with other people recently encountered who rank higher or lower on the same characteristics. Any example of this one? All right, simply put, again, I'm just trying to save time here. So contrasting is like, you're putting two different individuals or two different scenarios, and you're just trying to rank one as better and one as not better or worse, or higher or lower, like, ranking two different situations. When these two situations, they're entirely different and you cannot relate one with another, but you're just making a contrasting situation. So maybe a contrasting situation is like, you have like, two lectures, again, at the university context, maybe you have two different lectures and you're just contrasting one with another. And the way they teach, their teaching style, their way they manage the students and everything. You were just making comparison with two teachers, but essentially there are lots of factors. These two teachers, they're teaching entirely two different courses. Maybe one is teaching something very easy and someone is teaching something is very difficult. And there could be other factors as well. But even though you're just contrasting with one situation with another one, when a reasonable contrast cannot be made from one to another. And that happens a lot within the organization as well, when we do contrast with one situation with another one, not knowing the contextual factors. So that's another problem. Projection. What's projection? Attributing one's own characteristics to other people. Okay, here's one example. A manager who enjoys taking on new responsibility may project this tendency onto employees by assigning them extra job duties without first consulting them. Okay? So someone who is very efficient, or he or she thinks that she likes to take new responsibilities, or she is a workaholic, and she might think, well, I would expect the same from all other workers, and everyone should work at the same pace. But the reality is not everyone is capable of working at the same pace. Some people can be a slow learner, and it might take them a while to learn and get used to it. The last one was stereotyping. So stereotyping example, again, what stereotyping is, we talked about this one, judging someone on the basis of one's perception of the group to which that person belongs. Fayaz raised a hand. That's nice. Go ahead, Fayaz.
Sir, could you please repeat about projection?
Sure. So projection was attributing one's own characteristics to other people. So your own characteristics, and you're attributing that to others. So imagine you are a very efficient student, Fayaz, and you attribute that to others as well. You think like, you are in a teamwork, like, you've got a group work, you're doing this group assessment, and out of the 5 members that you have in your group, probably you are the most efficient one. And when you're submitting the assessment, you are expecting that all of the others, they would also work at the same pace, because you thought that, I was taking regular notes, I was doing my job properly, and I studied a lot. But the problem was the rest of the people, they did not study well, or they may not have that much capacity. They're not as smart or intelligent as you are. So eventually the result wasn't that good. So projection is sometimes we attribute others based on our own characteristics. All right. If you're efficient, or if you're capable enough, you would think that others would be like same, but that doesn't happen to others, because everyone has their own limitations or their unique characteristics. All right. Does that make sense, Faz?
Yes, sir. All clear. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Stereotyping, judging someone on the basis of one's perception of the group to which that person belongs. And we spoke about this one. Can someone give me an example of stereotyping?
Sir, for example, we might have a very bad perception of Mexican people. Like in movies or series, we see them talk in an exact accent, and they act crazy and all. So we might think that they are actually like that, whereas
Drug
they might
lords.
be just,
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the Mexicans are drug lords. They have money under their bed or something like that. Yeah, that is stereotyping. So you're just making that judgment of the whole group because you have just seen one person or your own perception. Based on that, you are making that assumption about the whole group. And we spoke about this before. Brown people always eat spices. That's one of the popular stereotyping behavior of the Western people. Muslims
Sir,
are,
Muslims are terrorists.
yes, that's right. All the Muslims are terrorists. If you've got a Muslim surname, that means you are likely to just plant a bomb or just nuke the whole world, something like that. From the organizational context, an old employee of the organization believes that young people are lazy and may notice that some of the young workers are taking extra breaks. But he or she is failing to perceive that older workers are doing the same. So a cliche or just like a conception is that, yes, young workers are always lazy because, they are all nerds, or they come to the office late, and that's how they like the old workforce, they would probably think that, yes, this is what the young workforce are. They're lazy, but some of the old workforce are lazy. And to the other extreme as well, the young employees, they can also think that, old people, like all the old peoples are same, slow to understand, not very quick, not smart, not intelligent, but that's not true. Some old people could be like that as well. So we spoke about these last week, and I really wanted you all to understand, because these are all quiz questions, these are all midterm questions. If you're lost in midterm and scratching your head, then you'll probably think of me that sir was telling us to think about examples, but I did not do it. So keep this in mind. We also spoke about specific applications in organization. Quiz question will be, what is a specific application of perception? And we know that, I spoke about this one before, again, just re-emphasizing that starting from the interview, starting from performance expectation, and then evaluation and employee effort, in every regard, perception matters. And where it matters more is decision making, and that's what we're going to very quickly look at. And after that, we will all do a practical exercise. I'll put you into groups, and then we will do that exercise. So decision making is the most important factor within the organization. One right decision can lead the organization to the success. And one simple or trivial decision, if it's poorly taken, that might lead an organization towards failure. So decision making is really the most important probably challenge for all the managers within the organization. But the problem with decision making is that decisions are based on our own perception, right? Because we make decisions based on our own perception, because we are all individual. So there are two managers. Imagine manager A and manager B. And when it comes to taking decisions, they mostly would rely on their own perception. And we know that perception biases occur. There are perceptual bias because we came to the understanding that this image here, like, two different managers, if I were you, I would probably be looking at a woman looking backward with a hat. But if another individual might say, this is an old lady, this is a very old lady, like that's her nose, that's her mouth, like, she's still wearing a hat, but this is actually the picture of an old lady. So what I'm trying to say is that for decision making, it's really important to understand that what are the various options or choices the managers may adopt when it comes to decision making. So there are some theories, or there's some guidelines when it comes to decision making that we're going to understand. Rational decision making. Okay, so the first type of decision making theory says that rational decision making should be the right way to take decisions. So can someone tell me what's the meaning of the word rational? Question to Nusaiba. What is rational, Nusaiba?
So rational means being fair.
Okay. All right.
Me.
All right. No, I'll take that answer. Okay. Can someone have a better comprehend what's rational? Maybe Nahia?
Logical.
What's rational?
Sir, being logical, sir.
Okay.
Logical and
that's-
reasonable.
Yeah, that's probably the words that I wanted to hear, like logical and reasonable, like, rational. We tend to say we always should be rational. So rational decision making is probably the first one, like, we might consider. So rational decision making is when you take simply rational decisions, like, your decisions are simply based on information or available truth or observed truth, what you see, and that is a rational or logical decision. Most of the time we tend to behave as a rational human being, and the society also teach us to be rational, right? And managers also need to be rational. So imagine, let me give you a scenario. So you see a worker, okay? She has been a very efficient worker. She has been working in the organization for 5 years. And then one day you reveal, like, she works in a bank, right? She works in a bank and she has been working on the teller of the bank where she counts all the money. 5 years, no bad record, working very hard. One day you found that like $1,000 was missing from the teller, which she was managing. Now, if you are a manager, what would you take a decision? What would be your decision? Would you fire? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Okay. So maybe some of you may say no, some of you might say yes as well, because organizational policy, if you consider rational, theft is considered as a severe allegation or a severe act. And for that organization, if it decides rationally, a rational policy would say, yes, you have to fire that employee because, some money is missing from the teller. So it's clear that she may have taken the money. And you might find out that, yes, she has taken the money. Would you still fire her? Maybe yes and no. Some of you might vary with your choices. If you find out that, yes, she has taken. But the problem might be that the reality might be different. Maybe she really took that money for some dire situation. Maybe she needed to buy some medicine for her child and she didn't have enough cash. So she thought, I'll take the money just for today and tomorrow I'll return it. So what I'm saying is that rational decision making may not always lead to good judgment or good result. So there's another thing that is called a bounded rationality. Individuals make decisions by constructing simplified models that extract the essential features from problems without capturing all their complexity. So the bounded rationality says that you don't always have to be rational. Sometimes you just need to construct a model, like alternative scenarios of that decision, all right? Think about some alternative situation. So imagine in this same case, when the employee, she took the money from the till or from the teller machine, you clearly found out from the CC camera footage that yes, she stole the money. It was found. And based on that, if you take a rational decision, you would generally fire her because she was clearly caught stealing that money. Now, in bounded rationality, what you might do that you would then try to project some models, all right, some scenarios. All right, so yes, it clearly shows that she stole the money from the cash counter. What could be some alternative situation, or what are the reasons? Maybe she was trying to take the money and she was trying to put the money into another counter. Maybe she took the money because she didn't have change, or she wanted to do something, or she wanted to do something. So what I'm trying to say is that inbounded rationality is that you're not always taking a yes or no type decision, which is in case of a rational decision making. A bounded rationality is that sometimes you just need to construct some simplified models, and that's based on available information. So you will still rely on available information and observed truth. That's what bounded rationality refers to. That not always be logical or rational, but sometimes you just consider some alternative situations. The third one is called an intuitive decision making. Yeah, Faiz, go ahead.
It means sometimes we have to be kind or something like that.
Well, in this case, just based on this case, you might say yes, kind, but it's not about being kind, like it depends on the situation. So it means that sometimes we have to apply some degree of uncertainty to available situations, that not everything is explicit, right? In logical or rational, you have to take explicit decision, but in bounded rationality, sometimes it's not as explicit as it may sound. So there are human factors, and you need to factor those human elements or those human factors. That's what in bounded rationality you need to consider. And finally, intuitive decision making is that an unconscious process created out of distilled experience. All right. So intuitive decision is generally, it's purely based on your gut feeling. All right. And it's based on your experience. So if you were told about this situation and you may not have even observed, or you know that, you know, like XYZ employee, despite being a very, like, you know, old employee of the organization, she may have stolen the money, you may be able to take that decision based on your gut. And your gut feeling might say, no, she can never do that because she is always a very efficient employee. I have knew her for the past 5 years, and she may have done it for some reason. So I wanted to check why she have done it, right? So that's called intuitive decision. So intuitive decision is also known as, like, you know, is based on your intuition or gut feeling. This is my gut feeling. I feel it's something like this. All right. So depending on the situation, you have to consider which alternative decision-making model you want to use. So as a manager, you need to consider, are you a rational manager? You're going to decide based on some bounded rationality, or you're going to take the intuitive approach. So these are the three alternative choices. Sometimes when you are struck with a problem that you don't have any available option, you can take a decision which is a satisficing decision, which is seeking the first alternative that solves the problem. Okay, so satisficing is nearly good enough decision. Not all the decision may be right decision, and you know that, but sometimes you want to take a decision that is nearly good enough decision. So that's called a satisficing solution. So with this one, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to put you into some breakout rooms. Okay, so in the breakout rooms, I will give you a scenario. And in this scenario, I want you to make a decision. Okay, so here's a situation. Don't read it yet, or you may start reading it now.